Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today's the 16th of June, 2018. In this session, we're going to take a look at Fairlight within DaVinci Resolve. Fairlight is the digital audio workstation built into Resolve, and it's relatively new, so it was first added, I believe, in version 14, which is the current version. It's also been updated, of course, in version 15 beta, which is where we're at right now as of the time of this recording. And let's just talk about it from the standpoint of, is it ready for primetime use? And I'm going to do, of course, I can only answer that from my own perspective and how I use Resolve and how I process audio in post for film and video. So that's really kind of the context here. So I'll share my opinions, and I want, first of all, to kind of say that I am not I'm not on either extreme as far as Blackmagic is concerned. I'm not like a fan. Well, like maybe I am a fanboy. I'm not sure. I do own an Ursa Mini Pro. It's my primary camera. I own some of their other products, Ultra Studio mini monitor, mini recorder, and I also have on pre-order their Pocket Cinema 4K camera. So maybe I am a fanboy, I guess. So that's a full disclosure, I guess. But I also have used DaVinci Resolve for a number of years for coloring. It's getting to the point now, though, where the edit panel is gotten quite good. I'm still a Final Cut Pro 10 user, so it's a little bit strange coming to this. There's some challenges still for me coming to this to do my editing here in terms of the overall video editing. They've just added Fusion in the beta version here. That definitely needs some work based on my experience with it so far. It's not ready for prime time in the beta. Now, again, I realize we're talking about a beta here. But even, I'll come back to that. Coloring is rock solid, and I've been using, obviously lots of people have been using DaVinci Resolve for coloring, and in fact, that's really what it was at first, was a color grading and correction suite. But now they're adding these other things. So edit's getting pretty mature. Fusion, not quite mature yet in my experience. We'll see what happens when they release the version 15 out of beta. And Fairlight was in 14, and now it's also, become more mature in 15 beta so far. I would say this, version 14, from my point of view, I attempted to use it multiple times. It was really buggy, and there was a lot of functionality that I didn't feel like ready yet. So for my workflow, it didn't work. There may be some people it did work for. In 15, no, I think we're starting to see a level of maturity that makes it a little bit more tempting. And, for me, the question is does that mean that I could start using this instead of or in lieu of Adobe Audition? And so let's kind of talk through things a little bit here. I will say this, I love the direction that DaVinci Resolve is going in terms of adding all of these things into one application. Am I optimistic that at some point in the future, this will be the only application I will need for all of my short film, video, editing, and finishing? I think definitely that could be the case for editing and coloring and doing the primary mix for sound. But again, because I'm more of a soundy, there's some things that I think need to mature a little bit to make this, I think, really ready for prime time for me, as far as I personally am concerned on the audio front. So I'm still going to have to do some round tripping to other applications for now. And let me explain what I mean. So first of all, let's talk about some of the kind of really cool features that I'm seeing here so far. Number one, if you have not used this before, DaVinci Resolve is quite amazing. You can get a free version. And as far as the audio is concerned, I think everything is available in the free version. I don't think there's any sort of benefit going to the studio version as far as audio is concerned. There are benefits for the other modules, certainly. That's amazing. A free digital audio workstation. I mean, we're talking about Adobe Audition, which is in most of the versions of the Creative Cloud that you can get where you pay for Adobe Audition along with other apps. It's $50 a month. Now, granted, you're getting a bunch of other apps as well, but even the studio version of DaVinci Resolve is $300 if you just went out and bought it. So that's like pretty much most of the apps that a video person, even a sound for video person, would need. So that you can get a free version is pretty amazing, number one. Number two, the nice thing here with this setup is that you don't have to potentially do as much round tripping. Now, I'm going to have to talk about that in more detail in terms of my particular workflow and the things that if I'm really investing in a piece and I really want to make the audio awesome, there are still some things I need to do in terms of round tripping. But the whole concept of being able to bring your media in, edit all of the video, add any sort of visual effects, do the color grading, mix the audio, and deliver all in one application is quite compelling. And even if we can't do absolutely everything in here. We can do a lot more in here than we've been able to do in any other application in the past. And so this is pretty impressive. So that's a really good thing as well. Number 3, there is some hardware support here. So for those that are into doing kind of higher end audio mixing, obviously Fairlight was a company that before Blackmagic bought them, they produced these really high end consoles. I mean, we're talking about massive mixing boards that were essentially had an integrated digital audio workstation in the boards themselves. It was very mature technology. It's a very high quality technology, and bringing that into Resolve and also still supporting a lot of that hardware. Now, obviously, a lot of us can't afford that hardware. We're talking about easily $30,000 to $60,000 consoles. I'm not getting any one of those anytime soon. But it also does have support. If we come up here under Preferences and we look under Control Panels, you can see here for audio consoles, it can support the HUI and the MCU protocols. So there are a lot of other smaller controllers out there that can use these. And then you can, of course, use the MIDI in and out. Now, I'm using a Allen & Heath SQ5 right now, and I'm still waiting for Allen & Heath to develop the MIDI drivers, so that I can actually integrate with this. Hopefully, that all works out smoothly. So that's really cool. In other words, I can mix with an actual control surface with faders and physical controls as opposed to doing it all software. Not everyone's into that. I find that a very good way to do some mixing for film in particular. So I will say that in version 14, I was able to get my PreSonus fader port, just this little tiny control surface working. For some reason, I haven't been able to get it working in 15 yet. So I don't know what's going on there. Hopefully they get that resolved and working here soon. And it may have just been something on my system that wasn't working. But in any case, that looks like that's the direction they're heading. Support for control surfaces. I think that's a really cool thing. The UI is really quite nice, actually, as well. In addition to being integrated with all of these other tools, just the DAW, or the Digital Audio Workstation UI, is really nice itself. You have up top the meters here. You also have kind of a master or control room meter and a loudness meter, and we'll come back and talk about that a little bit more. Here we have all of our automation controls, which we can toggle on and off if we want to use those or not. We have our tracks down here. We can, of course, resize them, things of that nature. We have our mixer here where we've got our virtual faders where we can do a lot of our mixing and automation in terms of pulling the sound tracks back at certain points and pushing them to the front at other points. We also have our inspector over here. We have built into each track, we have a variety of different things. Of course, we can control the clip volume. There's even a pitch bender, which is pretty interesting. We have an equalizer on each one, but we also have these other things here. We have inserts and we have effects, so we can apply effects to each track here. We have our EQ on each individual track, and again, this is all Fairlight stuff. We have our surround panner, and in fact, we can do that in this little interface here. So if I just want to grab this and move things around, I can do that as well. So really, really nice. So we've got all the surround mixing capabilities as well. Of course, we have our metadata for each of these, and all of these can be turned on or off. So if I want to make more room for other stuff, I can do that as well. I can turn my mixer on and off if I need to use that. I can turn the meters on and off. And then over here, we have some other things. So I've got my media pool, so all my clips, including audio clips over here. I've got my effects library. So this is good. So it comes with some really, really great effects. In fact, a lot of the things that you'd really need. So not everything, but pretty comprehensive. So we've got noise reduction, we've got a de-esser, we've got some other things that I may not use quite as often, except for maybe sound effects, like a chorus or a delay. Echo, got a flanger, we can do some modulation. This one's actually kind of interesting. We won't go into detail on all of these right now. We've got a nice reverb, and we've got a vocal channel. So a vocal channel makes sense here. For example, if I want to just drop that on a clip here. This includes a variety of things, a high-pass filter, an equalizer, and a compressor. So we've got all of that available to us. That's really nice that it comes with those. It can also work with VST effects, so you can buy plugins from other manufacturers and bring those in here. You can see, for example, I've got all of my isotope things, as well as my loudness meter from Julian. And then, of course, it's got some AU effects as well. We're on a Mac, so those come over as well. And we can turn any of these on and off in our preferences. We will talk more about this in the future. It's nice that these RX plugins work here directly in the, within this digital audio workstation here. Some of them do not work though. The one that's probably more important to me than any of the others is this RX6 Connect. That actually doesn't work. You'll see if we drop that on a clip, for example, we recommend using RX as an external editor in this host. And so of course you have to go to the documentation and see how that works. So this needs to be fixed from my point of view. And that's really, really, really critical for me from a lot of standpoints. That RX Connect is essentially what would take either an audio track or an audio clip from here and bring it over into the RX editor where you can do offline editing. That is to say, you can actually do sort of destructive editing on an individual track or clip. And that word destructive scares people away. I think it's accurate. I get it. You're actually changing the waveform, and once you save it, you can't go back. So it's destructive from that standpoint. But offline editing of audio is in some cases really important. For example, I think it's really important when you're doing loudness normalization. It speeds things up. So if you have to play through your entire piece with a real-time loudness monitor, that means you have to play through the entire thing to get a reading on whether or not you're meeting your loudness standards. And if you're not, then you have to go back and tweak some of the things and then play through it again and see if you're meeting the standards. So, and if your piece is a 10-minute piece, that's 10 minutes for each round. So it's better to be able to do that offline where you can say, you know what, run through this, check and see if we're compliant. And it should be able to do that within, for a 10-minute piece, usually it can run through that in about 10 or 15 seconds at the most with most modern computers and be able to tell whether or not you have your loudness in check. So there are some things I think from my point of view that are some challenges that still need to be overcome as far as this is concerned, in Fairlight in particular. So anyway, that's just something I wanted to point out here. Okay, there's also an index here. And a couple of other things here. I haven't set this up yet, but you can set up sound libraries. So if you're doing a lot of sound design, pulling in Foley and pre-recorded effects, you can just grab those from here. You can do the same with music and things of that nature. So I need to set that up. And then there's also the ADR panel. Now, I don't do a lot of ADR. In fact, I've only done ADR once. But it helps. This is a really nice UI from the standpoint that you can list out all the things you need to capture ADR for. Then when you go to your record panel, you can come here. It shows the picture to the voice actor, and what it does is it actually gives them a bunch of visual cues to know when they need to start saying their lines. So that's really nice as well, and you have some setup things here as well. So really nice features there as well. From my standpoint, that's cool, and I think that's really important, but I think they really need to get this worked out where we can send audio over to RX to do the cleanup, to do the loudness normalization and things of that nature, because those are all going to be critical as well. One thing that's really nice is they have a variety of different views you can use. So here, for example, you can see that my playhead is fixed. So it's the audio tracks that move, not the playhead. And you can also see that down here at the bottom, they have the Filmstrip. And what the Filmstrip does is it allows me to be frame accurate when I'm kind of deciding where to drop a new audio clip in. So I can make sure I get it in at the exact right spot. In some video editing apps, that's not as easy to do. And here, though, it makes it very easy to get it exactly where you want it to be. So I can actually go frame by frame. And then my playhead will be exactly where it needs to be. So if I know I want to drop a new audio clip right, boom, here, now my playhead's at the right place and I can drop that audio clip in to correspond frame accurately. So that's a nice feature as well. And you can see it shows the waveform as well. So here I can show the film strip, which shows the video, but I can also choose which audio track. I can choose 1 or 2 and bring those in. So that's cool. That's a really nice feature as well. I don't have to do the locked playhead. I can do the more traditional where the playhead scrubs and moves around. But I really like this locked one. So again, that's personal preference. All right. One thing that's really big for me, again, is automation. And some people end up, in fact, you can see here, this is our music track right here. And you can see during this first part, let me just zoom out a little bit here. During this first part, I'm doing an intro to a video, and you can see this is an automation of the fader. That means we've pulled the fader down. We want to duck the music behind my dialogue here. And then as soon as we go to the bumper, you can see we bump the fader up so that the music is now playing at full volume. And you can see we have a bug here. In reality, what's happening here is the fader is still up, and then it's automated down once I started talking again. So you can see and and now it has this funky thing here where it goes back up. So actually, if I play this back, it's not doing what this green line shows. So that's an example of the bugs that we still have that we need to work out here. And I'm confident they'll get there, but just so you're aware, that's one of the things that's a little bit frustrating. Now, what's interesting is that when I export this, the automation all worked. The music was quiet when I was talking, and it was full volume during the bumper, and then it went back down to quiet, kind of ducked behind my dialogue once I started talking again. So it works, but the visualization is kind of broken. And in fact, in version 14, I was having issues where it wasn't just the visualization that was broken, but the actual automation of the fader was broken, where I told it to fade back at certain points, and it sometimes did and it sometimes didn't. So that's all getting more mature now. Again, I would say certainly if you're doing anything serious, certainly things that you're getting paid for, you shouldn't be using beta software. So that's a warning that I would give to you. Now you can automate more things than just a fader. You can also automate your pan, equalization, compressors, gates, limiters, any sort of plugin you can use within here. You can automate that as well. So that can be pretty helpful. And let me give you an example of why you might want to do that. So for example, now we've just used a fader here to fade the music behind the times when I'm talking. But one thing you can also do that works really nicely is you could automate an EQ and use an EQ that sort of scoops. So for example here, what I might want to do is grab this. So yeah, a lot of times when you're equalizing music underneath dialogue, what you can do is you can kind of do this massive scoop underneath. This kind of reduces the music's output in the mid-range where the voice is, and it makes the voice come through louder when you don't have to necessarily fade the music back as much. So the music still seems kind of present, but it's not competing with the dialogue at the same time. So that's another type of thing you might want to automate when you're using the automation features here. So you could use that with the EQ here, or you could bring in a different EQ if you prefer as a plugin. So really kind of cool features there, giving the sound post mixer all sorts of options and all sorts of power to get what they really want. Now, not everything is rosy here. There are a couple of things. Again, as I mentioned before, the VST support is a little bit spotty. And the biggest thing, of course, is that RX Connect, which is not supported as yet. But the other plugins work, and that's great. So it's kind of a mixed bag there. Again, the important thing for me is that there needs to be, when you're doing really, really particular, focused, high-quality audio mixing work, you sometimes need that offline capability. You need to be able to edit the audio clips while they're not just playing back in real time. You need to apply the effects offline. Now, of course, you can also create all sorts of buses. So if you want to organize, if you've got a lot of tracks, organize groups of tracks into a bus, you can do that as well. And that gives you a lot of flexibility as well. Second up is the loudness meter here. I don't know what this thing is doing. It does not appear to be reporting LUFS. It might be showing LUFS relative to a target, but I don't know where to set that target. It's not here. In the Fairlight menu, there's nothing there. In the preferences, I don't see anything. You can see where your audio plugins are located. In any case, I don't really see what this is about. So I went and looked at the documentation. Documentation for version 14 says only this. And loudness meters for a precise analysis of your mix's perceived loudness. That's literally all the entire version 14 user manual says about the loudness meter. I get it. This manual is actually written by Alexis Van Herkman, who is a fantastic colorist. It's a very good manual overall, but I think they really need to hire someone else for the audio and the Fairlight portion of it, so that we can have a soundy in there and kind of really explain all this stuff in much more detail. So Blackmagic, if you're interested, I'd love to help out with that. Now in the 15 manual, this is, you'll notice this is just the new features guide. And so when I search for loudness, there's no mention whatsoever of loudness. So we really kind of need some documentation on what this is doing here before this becomes useful to us. It's cool that they included loudness, but we need to understand exactly what it's doing. And ideally, if it's not doing loudness metering based on LUFS or LKFS, which are the new standards that are required certainly when you're doing television broadcast, but are also very helpful for web and for theater release. It's really nice to have those standards to work with, so be cool to understand what's going on here. All right, as I mentioned before, 14 is really quite buggy in the Fairlight panel, and I just found it unusable. I think 15 is getting a lot closer. Things are still a little bit funky as far as the visualization of automation, and there have been some cases where the automation didn't work in 14. So in any case, again, I hope that they're working on that. I hope they're working on the VST integration and things of that nature. Now, one last thing I want to talk about is workflow. What we have done on this channel here and in my courses is we've used Adobe Audition, and there's a specific reason we did that. Number one, it's a tool that a lot of people use, but beyond that, the really nice thing about Adobe Audition is that it has two different views. It has a waveform view, and it has a multi-track view. So multi-track is what you would normally use for mixing, like you do here. So if I want to fade this track back a little bit and bring this track forward, or whatever it may be, I can do that in multi-track. But when it came time to do the offline processing things like loudness normalization, and I might even choose to do my noise reduction in an offline way, all those things where I can kind of get in and kind of fine-tune things. And in fact, doing educational type pieces, it's really helpful to have that waveform view, because what I can do is actually show the effects that a different plugin has on the waveform itself visually, in addition to what you're hearing. So that's really, really helpful when you're learning how to do things. So that's the main reason I use Adobe Audition. Now, the question is will I be able to replace Adobe Audition with Fairlight anytime soon? Well, unfortunately, from an educational standpoint, I think I really will still want Audition because I have that waveform view. When I'm actually going to do a mix, maybe it makes more sense in here. I'm not sure yet. So having some sort of round trip capability that doesn't involve actually exporting the audio and bringing it back in would be really helpful. And again, RX6 is a perfect example of that, where normally you would just apply this to a track and it would actually export that track and it would bring it back in and replace everything in here with what you did in the other editing application. So there's some work to do there. Now, what am I doing presently? So the last month I've been using this to do all of my YouTube videos. And what I've had to do is essentially, I did my edit. I brought the media in, did my edit. I skipped Fusion because that was very crashy. I did the color grading, and then I came to do my mixing. And you can see here, in fact, let's tighten this up so you can see more of it. What I have here, this is very simple here. So I just have a dialogue track here and I have a music track here, period. That's all I had in this particular YouTube piece here. And then this third track here was not there originally. This is the final mix track. So what that means in practical terms is I did my mix here. You can see I've got some automation here, and all the different things I did. And here at the end, you can see the automation does the opposite thing here. You can see once I stop talking, we fade it up to play the music. And then we fade it out at the very end. So it's just kind of a really simple mix. But what I wanted to do, in any sort of compression and things of that nature, I did in here. But what I wanted to do in the end then was to loudness normalize it. So what I did is that these were the only two tracks. I went over here to deliver. We come here to audio only. You can see we exported a WAV file. And we could do it in 32-bit. So I just exported this, brought it into Isotope Audio Editor, took care of the loudness normalization, exported it from there, brought it back in here. So then I muted these other two, the originals, and this was all synced up and ready to go. So then I could export the entire video. So I could come back over here and say, okay, we want to do YouTube. We're going to export the video and the audio, so on and so forth. So that's how the workflow works for me right now. It's as horrible as that sounds. You have to consider, I am up until this point, have been a Final Cut Pro 10 editor. So Final Cut Pro 10, I love for actually editing video. I don't love it for audio. And what I've always done is a similar type round trip where I had to essentially export everything to do the final mix in Audition and then bring it back into Final Cut and do a similar type thing. So yeah, I know that's a pain. Not everyone's going to want to do that. And in fact, if you don't necessarily care as much, and maybe at some point this loudness capability becomes pretty mature, again, you could probably do a lot of stuff in here. You could do everything in here, in fact, depending on what your production quality targets are. So you can do great YouTube videos just using DaVinci Resolve at this point without having to do the whole round trip thing. So the dream of doing everything in Resolve isn't here just yet for me, That doesn't mean it's not here for anybody, but again, just not for me. Based on the fact that I personally prefer to do some processing offline, which is really important for me. It may never get there, I don't know. Hopefully it does. But I'm actually very impressed with what Blackmagic Design has done here with DaVinci Resolve. I'm definitely impressed with the Fairlight panel and the progress they've made so far. I've worked in software development, and so I know how difficult it is, and what they've done in the approximately year and a half, it seems like, that they've been working on Fairlight in Resolve. It's amazing what they've accomplished so far. So I'm hopeful, and I actually am pretty confident that they're going to make some really good progress. And will it replace Audition for me at some point? Probably not entirely, but it will be cool for a lot of YouTube videos at least. I could probably do almost everything, if not everything, here from within Fairlight. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below, and we will talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.